Hello. Avinash, sir, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible. I can hear you.
Awesome, awesome. Great, sir. All right, शुरू करते हैं. Thank you so much once again, अविनाश सर, हम लोगों के साथ दोबारा से एक बार आने के लिए, फिर से बातें करने के लिए. पहले भी एक बार आई थिंक हम लोगों ने उसे किया था और मेरे को बहुत मजा आया था आपसे सीखने में. आज आई थिंक दिस इज इवन more of a juncture जहाँ पे कि we need your guidance and we really need to have your thoughts. So of course the broader हमारा discussion is going to be sectors to keep close and avoid. But उससे पहले थोड़ा सा if I may ask, what is your view of the market? What is going on? बहुत ज्यादा डिबेट है कि बॉटम बन गया है, बनेगा. This is the time to buy the dip. This is the time to stay away from a falling knife. What is your view on the market, sir, right now?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me again, and I think we'll make the podcast very interesting so that it's interactive for everybody. Coming to your question, has the bottom been made? I think that is a question which is very difficult to give you 100% right answer. But my personal feeling is we have not yet made a bottom. Because clearly I think in the next 3 months or in the next 4 months I expect that the retail is going to behave in the way it has always behaved. It will create a lot of panic. Today the markets have corrected, in the sense that the broad mid cap index, small cap index is down significantly, although the broader index is up, which clearly shows that there have been a lot of panic sell-offs. In fact, there have been some news reports that there have been some margin calls also which have been triggered. And my sense is, clearly as long as the FI outflow continues to gather momentum and the rupee continues to be weak, my sense is that at least till December 22, we are not going to see interest rate hikes getting stopped in the US market. And only after by December 22, hopefully, the effect of higher inflation, the effect of FI outflows would get, kind of moderately marginalized. So I think 15,000 according to me is a do or die level. I think if we are not able to maintain that 15,000 level for the Nifty at least in the very near term, then I think we could be headed for 14,700 or maybe 14,500, which is not completely ruled out. People have been talking about 14,000, and I think rather than making predictions, I think you need to be careful now because clearly fundamentals are not going to work. I think what is important is basically the liquidity and the macro events. I think hopefully if the Russia Ukraine war gets over within a fortnight or a month, I think that would be like a very sound and a very strong kind of a booster to the markets, because to a large extent commodities, to a large extent crude oil, interest rates, everything would start looking coming down, and I think the markets would start looking at market prices in a more positive way. Currently, I think probably 15,000 is a level which I would watch. Today we are at we were about 50 odd points up on the Nifty, but I think 40, 50 points से कुछ ज़्यादा फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. I think still there are a lot of retail investors who have got stuck up at higher levels, and I think despite the fact that domestic institutions are making full effort, FI outflows are going to be the key number to watch. So I think let's hope and pray that these numbers don't come bigger and bigger, क्योंकि ये नंबर अगर बड़ा आता है तो फर्क काफी पड़ेगा, क्योंकि लिक्विडिटी ड्रिवन मार्केट है. And no doubt, I mean, if these numbers increase in the coming days or weeks, then I think probably we could see levels even below 15,000. Although I'm not completely bearish. In fact, I've been telling my friends that these are levels where most of the research guys have to work harder. They obviously can identify very good companies at very attractive valuations. तो अभी तो आइडेंटिफिकेशन का टाइम आया है. If you don't identify very good companies at valuations at 18,000 or 20,000 of the Nifty, so I think it's going to be interesting. I think I've seen 2004, 2008, 2017. So I think every bear market is painful, but I think we should eventually obviously overcome this. I think you have to give at least 3 to 6 months more before this market stabilizes, and then we could see recovery going.
राइट राइट सर. सर एक इंटरेस्टिंग चीज यहाँ पे मुझे ये लगती है कि सो आई थिंक टेक्निकली कोई बहुत ऐसा स्टैंडर्ड डेफिनेशन तो नहीं है, बट जनरली स्पीकिंग आई थिंक 20% इज जनरली टेकन द नॉर्म कि अगर 20% मार्केट गिरता है तो वो कुछ बियरिश हो सकता है, और वी आर ऑलरेडी समवेयर अराउंड 17-18%. नाउ दैट इज वन एस्पेक्ट ऑफ इट, एंड द अदर एस्पेक्ट इज कि आई थिंक बहुत बहुत सारे लोग हमारे जो भी स्टॉक मार्केट में, इंडियन स्टॉक मार्केट्स में है, दे गॉट एसोसिएटेड विद इंडियन स्टॉक मार्केट्स ड्यूरिंग the COVID rise era when there was everybody was like कि markets अभी मतलब बुल रन एक बहुत अच्छा चला था. So I think बहुत लोगों ने वो bear markets देखे नहीं है, though even though मतलब these I mean it's still kind of debatable कि is it a bear market or is it a correction या जो भी. But what are your, मतलब, if I may have some clues from you, what should one do in such markets? What should be the strategy? And how should people who are new to markets, equity hold कर रखी है, कुछ fundamentally strong की, कुछ mid cap, small cap में भी hold कर रखा है, how should they face such markets?
I think, from an investment standpoint of view, my advice is that, my suggestion would be that basically, please don't panic. Don't sell all your holdings in panic, assuming that there is no, tomorrow for the Indian stock markets. Because normally, क्या होता है कि, for a new investor who has never seen a market crash or a gap down, kind of opening, for him it is a new experience. Especially as you rightly said, in the last 2 years, a lot of Robinhood investors came to the markets. It was very easy for them to make money in 2020, 2021. But I think 2022 has been like a very frustrating kind of year for them. And now looking at the kind of volatility in the markets, guys who are not having the patience and the guys who don't have the holding power, I think for them, it's going to be very, very difficult to make money. I think we have been telling our clients, our friends that, if you have invested in equity, even if your portfolio has seen a drawdown of 20, 30%, I think one thing is very clear that if you have good quality companies in your portfolio, they will definitely bounce back. It's not that they will not bounce back, but yes, unless you have kachra or you have got penny stocks in your portfolio, and you have businesses which don't have any kind of notional value, in the sense don't have any big competitive advantage. I think these are companies where it's better to exit and book out, because ultimately the market respects data, the market respects financials, it respects the cash flows. And whatever technical analysts say, I think, I had a debate about some time back on a Twitter spaces sometime last week, where a gentleman said that you should only look at charts and candlesticks, and that is enough for making wealth. So I completely, unaccepted this, kind of analogy. I told the audience that unless you have some idea about what that company makes, what is the corporate governance level, what is the balance sheet quality, what is the cash flow generated, I think these things are now seen by even the technical analysts. So कहने का मतलब क्या है कि आप अगर ढंग की कंपनी खरीदोगे, थोड़ा ऊपर भी खरीदोगे, तो कोई टेंशन नहीं है, बट आपको बेसिकली अच्छी कंपनी और अच्छे बिजनेसेस में पैसा लगाना है. Equity as an asset class will always outperform, over the longer period. Maybe for the next 6 months, my feeling is that markets will be volatile. There could be negative returns, but I think that is part and parcel. After 2 good years, I think the market will definitely adjust to a lot of macro variables like the Russia-Ukraine war, inflation, crude oil, commodity prices. I think almost everything has gone against the market. And plus, the main reason is I think FI liquidity is moving out swiftly. So I think for these new guys, my suggestion is that just keep your conviction strong, and I think keep a slightly longer time frame, because money which is made in the short term is always unsustainable. And in the markets, we always hear this thing कि अच्छी खबर और अच्छा स्टॉक साथ में कभी मिलते नहीं है. So basically, it never happens that you get a very good stock and the news flow is also good. So in these kind of markets, the stock will be good, the news will be bad. So that is how you got to capitalize, and obviously follow a slowly concentrated and a very activated kind of SIP approach. Right? There's no need to go and make a lump sum investment, because frankly nobody can predict the index levels and the stock prices. So I think you have to keep the faith, and you just have to give a longer time frame. That's all. I think it's as simple as that. But I think you should not lose your cool, and clearly avoid leverage, because guys who use leverage and then buy stocks are definitely in for a very tough period.
Right, right. Sir, this is there, of course. एक और इससे associated question which I want to ask before we actually move on to today's sector specific discussion is, what are the few key factors that maybe you are looking for where you'll feel कि हाँ अभी turnaround आ सकता है? Is it maybe FIS की वापस buying? Is it any technical indicators? Is it global macro environmental factors का improvement कि अभी वापस RBI या Fed अपना policies में थोड़ा ease out करें? What are you looking for to what do you think will be the first sign that markets will start turning around from here?
So I think the first sign would be obviously when commodity prices start falling significantly. Like today itself, you see what has been the scenario for copper, for for zinc, lead. commodity prices have got a very significant impact on the earnings growth of the entire Nifty companies and the Sensex companies. So it's very difficult to predict when FI flows will reverse. But clearly, I think a very simple indicator is when the dollar index starts correcting. I think that should give you a brief indicator that obviously the dollar index is falling. So obviously dollar abhi kam appreciate ho raha hai, and the rupee is also not weakening that fast. But I think from a fundamental perspective, if you ask me personally, I've been looking at companies now which consume all those commodities which had skyrocketed in the last 2 years. So it could be copper, it could be zinc, it could be a lot of other commodities like natural gas. So clearly, companies which are using these inputs as raw materials are going to be the first set of companies which are going to benefit. I mean, clearly, you could look at cable companies, you could look at companies which consume lead, zinc. All these companies have been badly massacred. Now, as far as the broader, bigger sectors are concerned, I think hopefully if the GDP growth continues, then you're going to see a lot of action on infrastructure. So macro numbers, from IIP, GDP growth, for banking, I think you need to look at the credit growth number, and I think that has been very strong, about 12-13% of late. So I think one needs the continuity of these numbers for at least 1 or 2 quarters. So it's not going to be just one day affair. तो कम से कम 3 या 4 या 5 महीने का consistent data आने के बाद I think I could say that yes, the markets have started bottoming out, and hopefully if these FI numbers start slowing down, like today, the news flow in the market is that compared to the FI sellout, the buying by the domestic institutions has exceeded. So a lot of people are saying whether FIs have run out of their firepower, but I think that is too early to predict, because even as of today, not a very large quantity of their Indian holdings have been sold out. And looking at the kind of interest rate hikes which are expected till December, I would not be surprised that FI outflow will continue. So basically, broadly, you got to see macro factors, because finally, when crude prices correct, obviously interest rate would also start stabilizing, and obviously inflation will come under control. So I think it's going to be a connected chain, and I think the bigger trigger would be in the short term would be the Russia-Ukraine war. If there is some surrender or some final decision that the war has completely stopped, that itself will give a lot of comfort and confidence, because typically क्या होता है कि uh, 3 months or 4 months before the recovery starts, the market starts discounting the process. So possibly the next 3 months are very important. If all these things materialize, then I think in the next 3 months we could possibly bottom out, and we could obviously assume that the recovery cycle will slowly start gathering momentum.
Right, right. Perfect, sir. So I think that gives us a perfect segue. I think from that sense, I think one of the sectors that you must have, a watch for is commodities right now. Is it so?
Yeah, I think commodities basically, I'm looking at the point of view that companies which actually make the commodities are going to suffer now, and the companies which are going to consume commodities like steel, aluminum, lead, copper. I think there's going to be a host of sectors which are going to benefit because of this fall. So I think that is the way you got to look at it, because typically in the last 2 years we've seen a very sharp rise in steel prices, in non-ferrous, ferrous, in copper prices. So I think that has impacted the raw material cost, the supply logistics side, and obviously because of the Russia-Ukraine war, obviously crude oil, natural gas prices, other commodity prices have gone up. So I think commodity is going to be a major focus area for me, but as I told you, I mean, we are going to see the user related sectors, because once the prices come down and obviously get triggered on the downside, then for a long time, whatever earnings damage was seen for these companies in the last 2 years is going to be now completely repaired, and you're going to see a lot of earnings growth coming from the user set of industry.
Right, right. Great, sir. So let's get down to it. Bilkul, which sectors are you keeping in your watch list, and what are you looking out for right now?
Yeah, I think before I tell you the names of the sectors, I am positive. See, there are two, three themes which I think will continue to be in focus, despite the fact that the market has come down significantly sharply. फर्स्ट इज आई थिंक डिजिटाइजेशन जहाँ पे होगा, वहां पे मेरे ख्याल से आई थिंक कंपनीज विच आर वेरी स्ट्रांगली फोकस्ड ऑन डिजिटाइजेशन वुड डेफिनेटली बी इन द फोकस, एंड दैट वुड बी अ वेरी गुड थीम. Secondly, I think wherever companies have deleveraged their balance sheet, it could be steel, it could be cement, it could be autos. So deleveraging is going to be a very important theme, because deleverage in the entire corporate sector has come down significantly. From about 3 or 4 years back, corporate balance sheets have been very strong and better. This applies even to the banks. The banks have reduced a lot of bad assets, and now their balance sheets are very lean and fit. And finally, companies which have got a very large domestic market. I think, the time has come for all investors to look at companies more specifically on, companies which have got a large domestic market. So I think demography is going to play a very important role. So, these two, three themes are definitely going to be in action. I think although these themes are not completely new, but I think this is definitely going to play out. And I think the first sector which, I'm very positive is, I think anything connected with agri. So it could be fertilizers, it could be seeds, it could be agrochemicals, it could be animal feeds, typically which has got something to do with agriculture. And the reason is very simple that see, not only the domestic market is a large market for agri, but I think the kind of geopolitical conditions which currently have prevailed in Russia and Ukraine, uh, there are a lot of reports which are being talked about that there is a huge food grain crisis which is going to develop across the globe. So, the countries like Ukraine, Russia, typically other European countries are fighting for simple, commodities like wheat or maybe billets or cereals. So, this is where Indian companies could get a larger share of basically agriculture inputs, for basically, later on when these countries get down to business and start again redeveloping their countries. So, agri is going to be a very strong theme. Of course, the domestic market is also very large. And I think this food crisis is definitely real. I think a lot of companies are saying that in winter, till winter, if the war situation does not, change, then it's going to be a very big crisis, because obviously Ukraine was a large player in market, in the wheat market. Russia was a large player in the wheat market. So internationally, a lot of European countries were dependent on Russia as a key supplier. So that is now completely stopped. And obviously, with US putting a lot of sanctions on Russia, I think it's going to be a very important, fact as to how the world is going to react in the new regime post the war also. So agriculture is going to be a very strong theme. I think very clearly, Indian companies like United Phosphorus, which is a global player, a lot of other players, which
Hello. Hello. Uh, right. I think there's some connection issue due to which we may have lost Avinash sir. I'm gonna invite him again. Just a second. Meanwhile, while we wait for Avinash sir to join back, I have pinned a tweet in this podcast, in this space, and if you have any questions to Avinash sir, please put them down in the comments of that tweet. Of course, we'll try to take up as many questions as we can, but due to time limitations, I mean, there may be some questions left, but yeah, we'll try to take up as many as we can towards the end of this discussion. So please post any and all questions you have to Avinash sir in the comments of the tweet that is pinned on the space. Hello, Avinash sir, are you there?
yeah, I can hear you. I mean,
Yes,
I,
yes,
I'm
yes.
sorry, the line got cut. I think without, I think when I was talking. So can you tell me where I was
Yeah.
so that I can, continue from where I stopped?
Just it was a very मतलब अभी अभी just ही cut हुआ था sir.
Okay.
So no as such
Okay.
nothing really
Okay.
lost.
Right. So basically, I was telling all of you that we've done a lot of work on the defense sector, and I think defense is now a sector which is no longer the old sector what we used to see about 4 to 5 years back. In fact, defense companies are going to see a lot of action on the export market side. We had some discussions, with the BTL management sometime back, and where they said that there is a very large opportunity in the export market also. So I think क्या है कि defense market में every player is unique. Every player has got a very large order book. So I think in case the market corrects, the market provides good opportunities even in this sector. Then I think there are many companies which possibly could give you a lot of good revenue as well as earnings growth, which the market would love to have over the next say 2 to 3 years. So I think companies like Bharat Electronics, for that reason, Bharat Dynamics, for that reason, companies like typically which are L&T, or for that reason Bharat Forge. These companies have also managements have also told us that defense is one space where demand is not a problem, but it is only about execution. So I think the second sector, I think, which all participants should look at actively is defense, because this is not a sector which is going to be impacted by high interest rates or high crude prices or inflation. They have a clear set demand picture in front of them, and I think it's all about execution. Then I think the third sector, which we have been looking at, is very interestingly fourth quarter numbers. What we saw is basically shipping and logistics. If you observe the numbers in the fourth quarter, I think almost every company has shown extremely solid numbers, and I think logistics is a sector which is very directly linked to the GDP of a particular country. So we are hoping that in the next 2 years GDP growth rate will be about 7.5 to 8%. So logistics will definitely take the focus, and I think companies which are into express logistics, companies which are into infrastructure logistics are definitely bound to show good numbers. I think classic examples have been companies like All Cargo, Shreyas Shipping, PCI Express. All these companies, according to me, not only in their conference calls, management commentaries, but even in their numbers, have expressed a lot of confidence. In fact, today, just to point out, Alcargo was down significantly. It was quoting at around 250. Sometime back, it was quoting at 300 rupees plus. So obviously, the mid cap, sell-off has affected even good companies. So our sense is that looking at the uptick in the global demand, plus the kind of exports market which exports which are growing, plus the kind of imports which are growing. I think companies which have got a very good geographical kind of spread, not only domestic and export markets. I think those are the companies which one should keep under their radar. We particularly like companies like PCI Express, companies like Al Cargo. Typically, even share shipping is a good bet. I think the shipping is also slowly moving out and coming into a much better kind of shape. So I think clearly shipping and logistics is one company where I think all of the participants should keep a watch. And the next sector is something to do with chemicals, but again, chemicals where the company is a sole manufacturer of these import substitute. I think there have been many companies in India, which are basically making only import substitute products and are largely monopoly players. Classic example is, Deepak Nitrite, who's into phenol and acetone. Then titanium dioxide is not made in our country, but Make Money Organics is slowly and surely expected to commission its first capacity, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months. Epichlorohydrin, again, a very strong, import substitute product which Make Money Fine Chem makes. In fact, demand exceeds supply and prices are still very remunerative. Most importantly, I think wherever the company makes the import substitute product and it's a one company oriented player, a classic example is also GNFC. GNFC, unfortunately, now is an FNO stock, but if you look at the business, what they do, they are not a fertilizer company, but they are largely a specialized chemical company making TDI. And TDI prices in the last 3 to 6 months have shot up significantly. The management has also indicated that at least for the next 6 months, prices are unlikely to come down. So, this is also, one of those companies where a lot of cash flow and a lot of upside is expected. I mean, the visibility obviously will depend on global factors, but companies which are into acetic acid, something like GNFC or Lakshmi Organics, I think one needs to look at these, product kind of generics in a very focused way, because finally, if the product is great, if the product is an import substitute, and there is no other player in the market which caters to that product in the domestic market, then I think these are clear domestic kind of proxies for a very growing kind of market, because these kind of chemicals have numerous applications. So I think the third sector will be something like import substitutes. And then I think we also like power generation and basically power distribution and basically platform companies which operate here. So despite the fact that power generation is a very known story, I think after a very long time, power generators have become the flavor in the markets. People have realized that post the COVID, I think consumption has increased, production has increased, and I think the governments have also started looking at these companies favorably. Power tariffs are also expected to go up in the next, say, 2 to 3 years. And most of these power generating companies are now looking at new avenues for growth. Most of these companies are getting into solar, renewable, green energy. Some of them are moving into electric vehicle infrastructure. So, there are lots and lots of opportunities. In fact, just recently, about a couple of weeks back, Adani announced their decision to get into hydrogen. There are some companies which have already announced, their move to hydrogen. So, despite the fact that hydrogen is still a very long distant possibility, get to catch in a big way. although competition is expected over the next 2 to 3 years, but I think the business is monopolistic, the business is scalable, and most importantly, it's a very low cost model as far as the asset intensity is concerned. So I think even companies like REC, or for that reason, companies like IEX should be looked upon, because distribution is also going to be a very important parameter when you look at power generating companies, because distribution kind of geographically kind of points which these companies have got will definitely help them, because it's not a very easy business for any new player to come in and grab market share. And then, of course, we continue to be positive on the export-oriented companies. I think despite the fact that global headwinds are challenging, our sense is that any company which does not import any raw material, but which has a large exposure in terms of revenue mix from from the US or the Europe and earn dollars, are sectors like pharma, IT, for that is an automotive component, textiles. So these are sectors which are traditionally very strong on the dollar inflow side. So my sense is that despite the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty on IT, considering that US may go into recession, the best part for Indian companies is that the labor arbitrage still favors Indian companies, and it's not going to happen that India will completely lose out their market. In the past also we have seen that these companies have always been discounted by these kind of negatives, but when the recovery happens and when these companies start showing stronger recovery in terms of their top line order book and obviously their earnings growth, the market definitely rewards them with higher multiples. And the best part is most of the large cap IT companies, mid cap IT companies have corrected very sharply. I think interesting bets could be KPIT, which is largely focusing on the automotive and the electric vehicle kind of segment, which my sense is going to be a very big opportunity over the next, say, 4 to 5 years. So these could also be interesting sectors, because now the markets have come down. I think across the board there have been selling. So as far as these sectors are concerned, the best part is that they are not import dependent, and most importantly, they generate dollars. Afterwards, I would believe that looking at the frontline, index oriented companies like banks as well as autos and auto components. Now, in autos, clearly green shoots have been visible on the passenger car side, on the commercial vehicle side. Two-wheeler sales still continue to languish, but I think in due time, you will probably see a kind of a recovery in the two-wheeler as well as in three-wheeler segments. Three-wheeler is a very small pocket, but two-wheeler is one segment which has underperformed for a long time. So our sense is that, at current levels, maybe one may not get that kind of upside on the two-wheeler basket side, but especially commercial vehicles and the tractor segment and the utility vehicle segments are experiencing very strong growth. In fact, one reason why we were positive is that we had met Mahindras. Mahindras are talking very big for their electric vehicle strategy. Plus, they are very positive on their tractor market strategy. And plus, players like Maruti, which remained silent on the electric vehicle market for a very long time. Finally, we saw that they have announced a 10,000 crore investment for electric vehicles, which is going to mean that in the next 2 years, their first EV vehicle will be rolling out on the roads. So I think auto components, obviously, because they have a direct correlation with autos. And then, as far as the banking side is concerned, I think despite the fact that these banks have been, mercilessly thrashed, especially the PSU bank, the private sector bank, one thing is very clear that bank balance sheets are probably the best at this point of time as compared to what they were 5 years back. And even the PSU bank, like something like a SBI or maybe a Canara Bank or an Indian bank, they look pretty attractive, because I think managements have realized that asset quality is one of the topmost priority, and loan book growth is going to obviously get a big accelerated push, because credit cycle, the credit growth cycle has now moved up in double digits, which is a very positive sign, because which means that corporate capex is also going to get geared up. So I think within the public sector and the private sector, I think these could be the, in the private sector. We are particularly bullish on the larger banks, because we feel that these banks have the capacity to face any near-term challenges, something like an Axis Bank or something like a ICICI Bank. We would still not be comfortable with Bandhan Bank, because we feel that there are several headwinds in the microfinance space. So I think probably another 1 or 2 quarters things could improve. But I think core banking and core basically value-added services which the banks provide, like an ICICI or Axis, I think where they have got a large exposure even on the digital side, could possibly give a lot of run for most participants' money if you put your money currently in these companies, because clearly I think visibility seems to be very strong. The management seem to be confident that corporates are more than happy now to spend money on fresh capacity built up, which was not the case a couple of years back. After that, the last two sectors which we are positive is basically companies which are into the ethanol business. I mean, ethanol companies, sugar companies also today have been mercilessly trashed in the market. But I think the economics of ethanol is really amazing. My sense is that even if we have higher capacities over the next say 2 to 3 years, we will still be short of ethanol. And I think the opportunity for ethanol has been directly been pushed by the government of India, because the government of India has realized that if they want to reduce their trade deficit, they want to reduce their foreign exchange imports, then the only way is actually to push ethanol and increase the blending ratio. In fact, the blending ratio is now 10%. The target for 25-26 is 20%. So, which means that every drop of ethanol which is going to be made by every ethanol player is going to be consumed. And the best part is ethanol prices have been continuously increased by the government. So, I think that government push will continue, and till the time there is an equilibrium in demand supply, I think most of these companies should do well. Although this is a sector which is known to everybody, I think the current fall in the market could possibly provide a good opportunity, to get into some good large sugar companies which have built ethanol capacities. And finally, 2, 3 sectors which we feel are clearly looking very solid are basically the capital goods sector, the construction building product sector, and the QSR segment. QSR particularly appeals to us because it's a B2C segment. And after a very long period post COVID, things have normalized. I think there are a lot of players which have now entered, after Jubilant entered the market. But clearly, I think there is a choice for everybody. We have seen companies like Devyani International, Sapphire Foods, or for that reason, Jubilant Foodworks. I think the biggest advantage is that here the business is growing voraciously, and the customers are more than willing to pay a higher price. So, the pricing is definitely in the favor of these companies. And since it's a food item, inflationary cost pressures are not actually bothering them. It is not pinching them that badly. And as far as the capital goods sector is concerned, after a 10-year lag, where almost nothing happened, we are seeing a lot of interest coming from corporates for increasing capacity, for increasing product-related kind of capacities in their factories. So I think players like Thermax, or for that reason, a player like Larsen and Toubro, or for that reason, even Anup Engineering. Incidentally, Anup Engineering has got a 300 crore order today, and the stock was mercilessly hammered today in today's market. So clearly, visibility is expected strongly over the next, say, 3 to 5 years. So I think I'll say that these are the sectors which personally I have been tracking, and I've been putting these companies and these stocks from these sectors on my radar. What is avoidable, before we conclude and then start the Q&A, is basically the metal sector. I would believe one should avoid, because I think the fall has just started, and in all probability you could assume that we could be in for a very very negative cycle, at least for the next 1 to 2 quarters. So metals across ferrous, non-ferrous could probably significantly underperform, and I think there's a lot of scope for derating here. The second sector which we feel is still not making any money and cash flow for investors or the companies is basically the aviation sector. I think companies like SpiceJet, companies like Indigo, despite the fact that they have started operating at pre-COVID levels in terms of their capacity utilization, I think cash flows are going to be under very significantly lot of stress, because even as of now, as we speak, I think none of these companies are making cash flows which could sustain their operations for a long time. And obviously companies like SpiceJet are extremely vulnerable, because they don't even have the cash reserves with them to defend these kind of challenging times. The other sector which is going to be extremely competitive, and which I think a lot of you might have heard, is the paint sector. I think for the first time we are going to see a very strong competitor in the market in the form of Grasim coming and putting up an investment of almost 10,000 crores here. JSW has also started, producing paint. So I think the market is going to suddenly see a lot of variety, a lot of price cutting from these two players, and I think it remains to be seen how the other companies react, like Asian Paints or a Berger, or typically a Indigo, where the market size is growing, but I think now growth will come at a significant cost. So I think it's better to be a little wary and cautious, because normally when there is pricing pressure, I think when competition increases, I think that is a time when you will not see a strong growth on the operational EBITDA in the kind of earnings growth these companies show. And finally, within the FMCG pack also, we are very selectively positive. Broadly, we expect that FMCG is also one space where valuations are still pretty expensive. And I think even despite the fact that these represent the consumption theme, I would believe that only if there is a significant correction, then only I think FMCG should definitely look attractive. Otherwise, most of the broader FMCG names like Hindustan Lever, a Dabur, or maybe a Britannia, I mean, these companies are definitely well managed, but at these kind of valuations, it's very difficult to believe that whether one could make a very reasonably good risk reward ratio over the next, say, 12, 15 months. And finally, the oil marketing companies, we have been hearing a lot of noises from companies like MRPL and IOC, BPCL, HPCL. I think this is also one space which has become more like a trading bet. As the crude prices stabilize and obviously gross refining margins stabilize, I think this is one area where possibly, an investor may not make that kind of money, although it may be still be good for a trader. Oil marketing companies are definitely not advisable to put your money now, despite the fact that normalcy has come in the automotive sector, in the aviation sector, throughput has increased. And finally, we are still very skeptical and negative on companies which represent the new age internet companies. Companies like Paytm, Zomato, Policy Bazaar, Car Trade, Nika. I think these are all companies which still trade at exorbitant kind of valuations, and there is a long way before possibly these stocks could further get cheap. So I think the businesses of these companies are great, but the valuations of these companies are definitely not so attractive, which could possibly say that there's a great opportunity to buy these stocks at these current levels. And I think in these kind of markets, without in the absence of any operating profit, or maybe without any operating cash flow and a lot of cash burn, I think these are the most vulnerable kind of companies, because finally, price to sales worked at a time when the market was in a kind of a exorbitant kind of exuberance. But as of now, markets are looking at realistic scenarios where obviously companies with a very strong kind of earnings growth, companies with a very strong growth in revenue as well as operating profitability, and obviously where the risk reward is in your favor. So I would say that these are the companies which I think investors should avoid. Frankly, valuations really don't matter here, because it's all about only the price to sales multiple, which in today's context has really got no meaning. So today a Nika which was probably discounted at 50 times has now come down to roughly about 30 times or 35 times. Even at these levels, the business looks pretty expensive if you look at the kind of cash flow the company has generated. And the same thing is applicable to Paytm, which expects its operating EBITDA to come by September 23. So I think there is a long kind of runway for these companies to start making money. So I think I'll end my discussion here on the sectors, and I think I would be happy that if we can start the Q&A, or maybe somebody has some other view about these sectors.
राइट डेफिनेटली सर क्वेश्चंस तो मेरे पास भी बहुत सारे हैं बट ऑफ कोर्स मैंने एक ट्वीट पिन किया था स्पेसेस में एंड वी हैव गॉट अ लॉट ऑफ क्वेश्चंस देयर तो वी कैन आई गेस टेक देम अप फर्स्ट एंड देन इफ वी गेट टाइम आई विल आस्क माय क्वेश्चंस एज वेल ओके सो एक क्वेश्चन सीए वरुण गुप्ता सर का आया है कैन आई इन्वेस्ट इन जोमेटो एट करंट मार्केट प्राइस फॉर लॉन्ग टर्म उसका आई थिंक हम लोग आपने थोड़ा सा टच अपॉन ऑलरेडी कर ही लिया है कि न्यू एज इंटरनेट कंपनीज मे बी आर नॉट सच अ गुड बेट राइट नाउ then Funkmeister sir का आया है should I book loss in Nazara, Route and DMart or worth waiting for another 6 months in case you're tracking any of these companies sir?
So I think, see, my guess is that the gaming sector is going to do extremely well. And I think Nazara has already announced a bonus issue. Route Mobile is also a very good thriving business, but unfortunately, pricing, from the peak levels has corrected significantly. So unless the investors have got a at least a 2 year kind of time frame, I think if they don't have a 2 year time frame, then it's no point in holding on. But if you feel that okay, 2 years is a time frame where I can hold on to these stocks, because Route Mobile is definitely a value-added telecom player. Nazara is a very strong player on the gaming side. So businesses are great, but the current trend in the market prices will not change unless the market sentiment changes and the earnings recovery gets more stronger. So I think keep a time frame of 2 years, and then I think one can hopefully expect a decent upside. But in the short term, I don't think anything great is going to happen.
Right, great sir. Okay, Dinesh Kumar sir ka hai, can you please share good stocks to buy? So sir, this entire discussion has been regarding that. You can probably we will tweet a recording of this podcast right after it's over, so you can probably listen to that. Amit sir ka aaya hai, sir your views on sir, are you tracking Vedanta by any chance? Amit sir has requested you for your views on that.
See, I think Vedanta is a clear representative of the metal and oil sector, and it's largely a commodity player. My sense is that, see, now the commodity cycle is going to go in for a very tough time. And if crude corrects down to 85, $95 a barrel, if aluminum prices correct, which are more or less expected now, I think the coming 1 or 2 quarters, or maybe the next 2 3 quarters, are going to be extremely challenging. you could find profit margins getting squeezed. And most importantly, this management is not very highly regarded in the markets. So I think except for the dividend factor, I think growth now is going to be a big question mark. So I think, if you have the stocks, I think I would suggest that it's better to sell on the rise. In fact, today the stock corrected significantly. So probably you could wait for some time, but I think in the near term, I don't see any major earnings triggers here. So I think not advisable to buy, but if you hold, I think just wait for a bounce to exit.
Right, right. Perfect, sir. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so then Deepak sir का आया है. What about auto ancillary specific bearings?
Yeah, I think
So,
bearing companies should do well. I think companies like SKF, companies like typically Schaeffler India, or companies like even Rolex Rings. I think these are all great companies, but I think you must understand that these companies have been identified. They've been followed by investors for a long time. So I think hopefully if the market corrects and you get opportunities in some sort of a gap down opening or maybe a panic sell off, I think keep these companies on your radar, because I think over the next 12, 18 months, bearing companies should do significantly well. And I think a lot of these companies have started now supplying to electric vehicle, kind of car companies, where the bearings are far different from the normal IC engine. So I think growth prospects are good, but I think from the risk reward point of view, maybe you should buy, them at slightly lower level.
right. Perfect, sir. Okay, so उसके बाद मोनिका मैम का आया है. Please share thoughts on Titan and Deepak Nitrate. Is it a good time to take entry in case you're tracking these, sir?
Yeah, I think, see, Titan is definitely a company where largely it's a lifestyle company operating in the gold jewelry segment. And I think if all of you might be aware that, see, the pricing for Titan has always been at a premium to the other competitors. So I think they never have a problem of demand. My sense is that the kind of correction you're seeing in Titan is really a short-term issue. Company has a very very strong business product model, and I think the best part is they've always targeted segments which were not existed earlier. So they were very they were very proactive in identifying new business segments. In fact, now just to tell you, they've identified saris as a very big segment, and in fact, the next 5 years. One should not be surprised that they could possibly be selling a lot of premium saris to the female audience. So my sense is that yes, the growth will definitely continue. I mean, the stock has also corrected significantly. So if you want to buy, I think use a SIP strategy and build a kind of a position for a long term portfolio. I think this stock may not give you returns in the next 3 to 6 months because valuations are not very cheap. But yes, from a 2 to 3 year kind of time frame, it definitely looks.
Right, great, sir. Okay, उसके बाद एक क्वेश्चन है सर. What are you thinking about Nifty tomorrow? So it's a broader discussion तो एक हमने किया. Do you have any thing in your mind for what might happen tomorrow specifically?
Yeah, I think my guess is tomorrow also the markets will inch up because uh, there has been a lot of selling in the market. So some bounce will come. Maybe you could see levels of 15,500, 15,600. But I think the key issue is that how long will this be sustained? Because at higher levels, what we have seen is the markets have not been able to sustain the higher levels. So I think for a trader, you need to look at your stop losses very clear. And when you're talking about a day's view, I think in the way markets have been moving in and out depend clearly on what kind of global factors play out. I mean, the crude price, or maybe the FI outflows, or geopolitically what is happening in Russia and Ukraine. So I think tomorrow we could see a little bit of more bounce because some sort of more short covering could come in. But medium to longer term trends, I think there are going to be a lot of breaks in between, and that is something which I think only time will tell.
Right, right, sir. Okay, next sir, दो stocks आए हैं वसीम शाह सर का और अमित सर का. One is Vardhman Textiles and Amar Raja for long term.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned to you that Amara Raja will benefit if lead prices come down significantly. The trend has now started, but now we need to see how sustainable this trend is in the downward trend for all commodities like lead, zinc, copper. So hopefully, if the next 1 month or 2 months you see continuously falling prices for lead, that should be an indirect signal that Amara Raja battery should do well, because see, fundamentally it's a great business. They are virtually a zero debt business. They have reasonable cash on the book. But I think once the raw material scenario becomes more or less predictable, and obviously it starts touching lower and lower kind of levels, that would definitely be positive for Amara Raja. But as of now, I think one could take a bet if somebody is a contra investor. But currently, it will be very immature to tell that whether the trend is going to be negative. So you'll have to wait for some time before that could actually benefit Amara Raja. And which was the other company?
So Vardhaman Textiles.
Yeah, I think Vardhaman Textiles also, if you see their asset built up and their capacity, they have been, leaders in basically yarn and textiles, and I think they do a lot of exports also. I think at least in the very near term, what we are hearing in the market that yarn prices have corrected, so obviously there has been some pressure on the profitability. But I think if somebody has a long-term view, Vardhaman Textile definitely is a very solid player. A large capacity has been built by them, and they have been in this business for more than 3 decades. So I think clearly they know that business very well. So I think clearly if somebody were to take a 2 to 3 year kind of timeline, then I think definitely one can make a reasonable kind of risk reward. But in the short term, there could be a lot of margin pressure because overall cotton prices have touched peak levels. Yarn prices have slowly started correcting in the market. So I think fresh buying. I think there's no hurry. Wait for some time. I think you could possibly see little lower levels as the market corrects. If at all.
Right, perfect, sir. So इसके बाद वरिंदर राणा sir has sent his love and he is a big fan of yours and he has insisted that I do cover it in the podcast. So yeah, that's that. Then sir, there are two more stocks: Ambuja Cement and Gujarat Gas.
Yeah, I think Gujarat Gas, my sense is that, as of now, the next 2 quarters are going to be challenging because, as I mentioned earlier, natural gas prices have shot up. And I think the best part for most of the city gas companies, including Gujarat Gas, is that there's a lot of pricing power with these companies. Like, I know somebody in MGL who has actually told me that despite the gas prices increasing, they have raised prices by almost 4 to 5 times in the last 6 to 8 months. So clearly, pricing power is there. But how much demand is going to get impacted by these price hikes is something which is difficult to predict. But I think gas as a clean source of energy is definitely going to grow exponentially over the next say 3 to 5 years. And I think most of these companies are cash rich. They've got a very large distribution network. And I think overall gas consumption is going to grow in India. So I think somebody who looks at these companies from a longer term perspective can definitely look at it. Any decline is an opportunity, provided you have a long term kind of time frame.
Right, right, perfect, sir. इसके बाद सर this is an interesting question. सिद्धार्थ मलिक सर ने पूछा है. Recently the rates have been hiked, and which company's balance sheet other than financial sector will benefit from the interest income? So are there any other sectors that you think will benefit from increase in interest rates?
Yeah, I
Like,
think I
yeah,
think when the interest rates go up, typically, in the longer term, it is the banks and the housing finance companies because higher interest rates obviously benefits them because they make a better yield. But I think higher interest rates is also good for those companies which are sitting on a lot of cash and investment because their treasury income also increases. So I think, typically a company which is debt free and which has got a lot of cash on the books can obviously expect to make a higher treasury income because obviously corporate bonds or for that reason interest rates by nature will ensure that a higher share of the treasury income comes on the PBT. But I think largely the interest rate hike is beneficial for the banks, the non-banking finance companies, because clearly, they will have to pass on to the customer. And I think this is a very generic kind of business which they do. So it's not that one bank will offer a significant discount in the interest rate to one customer and somebody will offer a very high interest rate. I think when interest rates stabilize, what happens is for most of the housing loans which are on the variable side, the interest rate starts, automatically gets factored in for the higher rate. So I think longer term, it's going to be the banks, the housing finance companies which will benefit. And obviously, then, as I told you, the richer corporates which have got a lot of cash on the books and which are, generating a lot of free cash, obviously will make a lot of other income because when rates increase, their treasury income also should obviously.
right, right, perfect, sir. Okay, so next दो stocks मेरे भी मतलब one of the stocks is my favorite, of course. Bharti Airtel is one, जिसपे आपका view पूछा है, and one is ITC. So we kind of discussed that FMCG may not be doing so well, but ITC I'm interested to know because recently I think it has given some good performance.
No, I think ITC is definitely going to benefit because first of all, it's not a pure FMCG player. I think cigarettes still continue to be their main revenue and profit contributor, and I think they have got some additional levers coming in from the paper business, from the hotel business. In fact, the hotel business grew by almost 35%. The paper business grew by almost 23, 24%. They are setting up a new paper plant now in Nadia. So my sense is that, luckily, they are also on the agriculture side. They've got a unit which is known under the name of E-Chopal, which is exporting a lot of agri-related kind of products and services. So I think, they have all the businesses which are into a pretty good shape, and hopefully, if COVID 4 does not happen significantly, I think, growth should continue. So my sense is that not only the top line but even margins will be protected, and I think unlike a pure FMCG player which have got affected by the raw material cost inflation, fortunately, ITC has managed to cover up these costs. In fact, in the fourth quarter, not only margins improved for their FMCG business, but I think they also launched several new products. So typically, I think FMCG is a very broad-based, diversified player, which obviously gets the benefit of a lot of these other growing sectors. And frankly, a company which has got a free cash flow of almost 12,500 crores, a free cash flow yield of 5%, a ROE of 25%. I think definitely it looks quite attractive, even if you look at it from a 1 year perspective. So our sense is that it definitely can give good returns. Which was the other company, Bharti Airtel, is it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Bharti Airtel also, I think, see, now when 5G is going to be rolled out, my guess is that you could expect a further ARPU increase. In fact, Mr. Mittal has always been vocal about this, and he was the first, promoter of any telecom company to say that we are possibly having the lowest tariffs in the world in the telecom business. So obviously, my sense is that over the next say 6 to 12 months, you could see tariff increases gaining significantly, and obviously that will definitely benefit the operating EBITDA, obviously benefit the cash flows. So my sense is that Bharti Airtel should definitely be considered, if you're looking at the next say 12 to 18 months, because telecom as a sector, fortunately after a very long time, pricing power has come back. Competition has reduced significantly, and I think we are all used to all our WhatsApp messages and Telegram group. So data is now going to be is consumed, very very liberally by almost everybody, and we just cannot afford to not live without the internet. So even if there is an ARPU increase, life will continue for us, and obviously that will benefit companies like Bharti Airtel.
Right. Perfect, sir. Okay. Next, sir, हमारा क्वेश्चन आया है, व्हाट इज योर व्यू ऑन एंजल वन? इज their shareholding pattern looks fantastic and it has corrected significantly.
Yeah, I think Angel One, the joke is that around 1800 rupees, nobody wanted to sell it. And today at 1100 rupees, nobody wants to buy it. So, it's a very ironical thing. But my guess is that, see, Angel One has benefited significantly because of the fact that it went completely digital. And I think it used digital as a very strong platform. And mostly, one thing what is very visible is that whenever the markets, boom out, obviously the first proxy is broking companies, and typically, the intermediaries like CDSL or typically, all the remaining regulatory kind of companies. So my sense is that, markets will obviously, punish these kind of companies also. Whenever the market corrects, you see volume shrinking, you obviously see lesser number of depository accounts getting opened. So I think going forward, the trigger for Angel One would be how long and how sustainable is their run rate in capturing more customers. Every month they publish numbers that show what are the new clients or what are the total number of clients they've bagged, what is their market share in the overall volume mix in the overall market. So I think these numbers in the next say 1 or 2 quarters, if the markets see some sort of a slowdown, if the markets correct, then I mean the larger trading appetite or the trading volumes could see a decent kind of shift and a proper probably a small decline, and that definitely could put a break on these kind of companies. So you have an ICICI Securities also which trades at a dividend yield of almost 5%, but unfortunately it has not shown the kind of growth what an Angel One has shown. So there is a lot of value in these companies, but I think if one were to expect a very significant, kind of re-rating in the next 6 months, that is something which is really difficult to visualize. So I think next 1 to 2 years, it definitely should do well. But I think over the next 3 to 6 months, it's definitely going to be a hard road ahead. For, Angel One as well as all the broking companies which are going to operate here.
Right, right, sir. ओके, नेक्स्ट सर हमारे पास क्वेश्चन आया है अंबुजा सीमेंट पे।
Yeah, Ambuja Cement, see now they have got a new promoter in the form of Adani, and I think clearly, what kind of strategy, what kind of management thought process comes from them will be seen very closely. I think cement as a sector is going to see a lot of competition. We have seen a lot of supply coming in from the new players. In fact, Ultratech has announced a large expansion. So I think that clearly shows that there's going to be a very strong market share fight amongst the top 2 to 3 players, because I think once Adani has acquired ACC, Ambuja Cement, I think there's going to be a fight initially for market share, and secondly, Mr. Adani has also said that he intends to double the capacity in the very near term. So clearly, I think cement capacities obviously are going to aggressively come up, and I think to that extent, if supplies increase, then obviously cement prices will come under pressure. I would be surprised that maybe despite the fact that GDP growth is going to grow in 7-8% digits, the profitability of these cement companies is going to be definitely watched very carefully. And in that perspective, I would say that if you have a Ambuja cement in your portfolio, you can hold on. Company will grow because it's a large player in the Western market. But if you intend to make a fresh investment, then I think it's better to wait. I think there's no need to hurry now. Probably a better entry point could be seen, in the near term.
राइट, परफेक्ट सर। सर इसके बाद दो हमने थोड़ा सा टच अपॉन किया था आईटी में, बट दो आईटी स्टॉक्स हैं, तानला एंड एचसीएल टेक।
Yeah, I think Tanla I don't track, to be very honest, because that is a management which I have not really trusted. Because the historical old days of Tanla, I remember I made a lot of loss in that stock. So frankly, I did not cover it. Once it started moving up, its nearest competitor is Root Mobile, which is also into basically value-added telecom services. So I think probably numbers definitely look good, but I think I would not be able to give you any basically research-based assessment as to whether to hold or whether to buy. So you'll have to pardon me there. So which was the other company you said?
सर एचसीएल टेक।
Yeah, I think HCL Tech also clearly is a distant cousin of the other two IT companies, Infosys, TCS. We have seen that valuations have never crossed, for HCL Tech, and they've always been at a discount to either TCS or Infosys. So my sense is that yes, the company is doing pretty well. They have a very good positioning in the US market, but I think clearly over the next say 3 to 6 months, I think one will have to see issues like labor attrition. Clearly, what is the kind of margin pressure they face, but definitely over the longer term, hopefully these issues are tackled. Then I think at these levels, HCL Tech can be a decent kind of inclusion in your portfolio, provided you can take a say 12 to 18 month kind of time.
राइट, राइट, परफेक्ट सर। ओके सर, हमारे पास क्वेश्चन तो बहुत 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 सारे आ रहे हैं, बट मतलब हमारा क्लोजिंग टाइम भी ऑफ कोर्स आ रहा है, एंड वी रियली अप्रिशिएट योर टाइम एज वेल। तो we'll definitely I would love to continue this discussion, but अभी के लिए I would love to have a quick remark, something, some suggestion for us, some concluding remark that you may have for us and our audience tonight, that will help us navigate through such markets, such dicey markets maybe, or any advice that you may have for us.
I think my advice and suggestion to all the participants here is that see, these kind of opportunities in the markets don't come every day, and they are not going to remain there forever. So basically, this is the time when you got to actually run through your filters, your screeners, and look at good companies which are offering you a very good entry point. Obviously, markets are painful. There are guys who have already bought in such kind of companies. They are now seeing a drawdown in their portfolios. But I think keep the conviction and keep the patience for equity, because equity is an asset class which has always outperformed all other asset classes. So my sense is that this is not going to stay for long. I think my personal view is that we could be in this kind of market for the next 3 to 6 months. Hopefully, 2023 should be much better. And I think once the Ukraine-Russia war corrects and gets completely over, I think you would see a dramatic change in the market sentiment, not only for the market as a whole, but even for commodities, for oil, for crude, typically for other commodity kind of input prices, and that will definitely create the sentiment more vibrant. And my sense is, I mean, just focus on good, fundamentally strong companies, because data is respected in the markets. And finally, companies which have got very strong businesses have always bounced back in the past. We have seen bear markets in 2004, in 2008. The markets have bounced back, have made a lot of money. So this is a time where you need to actually be a little contra. You need to have conviction, and you need to deploy a little bit of your money now, because when the markets go up again to 18,000, 19,000, at that point of time, you would not be getting these kind of prices. So I think some more downside is definitely left in the market, but I think you should never time the markets. Try to do a small SIP strategy and never invest your money in a lump sum. And I think as I told you, the sectors which I am positive. I think there are many experts who probably might have told you some other sectors also, but I think I am very positive on the sectors I told you. So these are sectors which I think you all should keep them on your radar, and I think you all should definitely look at these from a long term angle, and obviously chip in via a small SIP kind of approach, which I think will definitely help you in building a good portfolio. Because see, this is the time to accumulate and obviously wait for the upside, and obviously the wait will be well worth it only if you make that decision now.
Right, right. Absolutely perfect, sir. This has been great. Thank you so much, Avinash sir, and also thank you so much, audience, for sticking out with us for all throughout this hour. And of course, there are so many questions that we could not cover, but we'll definitely request Avinash sir to please allow us to host him again, and we'll take up many more queries. We'll discuss more about the markets and try to learn from him.
Anyway, thank you very much, and I hope all the participants benefited from my suggestions. I think definitely we'll cover more questions in the next podcast. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a really good night and a profitable day ahead. Bye bye.